There we go. So again, I'd like to welcome everyone to this month's Jyotish Journey webinar associated with the article, The Pillar's Prince. I mentioned in the beginning of that article that way back in 2015, among the first articles I ever wrote was one called The Pillar of Life. And it was all about the importance of the Lagna Lord. And one point that I was bringing out in that article that maybe I didn't remember to suggest here is that, if you have a strong and well-placed Lagna Lord, obviously not afflicted or badly afflicted, it's probably one of the best features a horoscope can have. The reason being is that all the yogas that maybe exist within the chart have an easier time, you might say, of fructifying, of coming out, if the Lagna Lord is strong and well placed. Now, this is not to say if you have good yogas in the chart, they won't come out if the Lagna Lord is not strong and well placed. But again, the classics of Jyotish emphasize a well-placed Lagna Lord for a lot of the yogas that are given. They'll give some yoga, there'll be some combination, and a part of that will be, the Lagna Lord strong and well-placed. So I probably should have sent out that article, The Pillar of Life, which I will do, so people have both, because it was a long time ago. It was 2015. Okay, so today what we're going to be looking at is just sort of different additional examples of where the Lagna Lord falls in a particular house, right? Which, because I'm mentioning that, it gives you a pretty big clue as to an area of life that is person's going to naturally gravitate to that, right? Indications of the house is something that's going to be particularly meaningful for that person, right? I think of myself when I was first learning about my Vedic chart, I'd always been attracted to mysteries. I thought at one point I wanted to be a detective, when I was growing up. And then I got very interested in all these esoteric, occult type of things. And then to find out that I had my Lagna Lord in the eighth with the eighth Lord, was very meaningful to me because it's such a reflection, right, of that sort of thing. And, people ask these questions about, well, what's my purpose in life? Now, that's a very big question, right? And there's different ways to approach that. But one of the things that I look at is where by house the Lagna Lord falls, right? And so this is why I decided to write these articles and just emphasize these. And oftentimes students ask me, beginning students, well, so much you can look at in a horoscope, where do you start? Lagna Lord is where you want to start, right? Okay, so without further ado, and so we're just going to look at one thing I mentioned at the beginning of the article. What's the best thing that can happen to the Lagna Lord? What's the best thing that can happen?
Being its own house,
Being in its own house in the Lagna. Right?
yes, in the Lagna, and
So,
strong,
okay.
has some kind of strength. Yeah.
So, and then if that planet is a natural benefic, right, all the better. Now, then what yoga is automatically being formed? Some significant yoga related to the Lagna Lord is automatically being formed when you have the Lagna Lord in the Lagna, especially a benefic. What do you have?
Mahapurusha.
You're going to have a Mahapurusha yoga, right? And those of you who have studied the Mahapurusha yoga with me know that if the Mahapurusha yoga planet is connected to the Lagna Lord, and particularly it's the Lagna Lord in the Lagna, then that's a particularly strong Mahapurusha yoga, right? And the person it's more likely to make a person someone who's a significant individual, right? Someone who is known, at least maybe within their sphere of life. So I want to start out by discussing some examples of that. And so I'm going to bring up my program here. And people can let me know when they're seeing the chart of Prince Henry of England. Not yet. Should be coming up now. Yes. See the chart now?
Yeah. Yes, Mark.
Okay. So the reason I'm showing you this chart is, of course, we have a Sagittarius Lagna with Jupiter, the Lagna Lord in the Lagna. And why would this be slightly better than own sign? What would we look at to see that this is slightly better than own sign?
It's Mula Trikona.
But why, Randall? Degrees.
Yeah, the degrees of it.
Right. So Mula Trikona for Jupiter in Sagittarius is within the first 10 degrees. So it just makes it, right? And, of course, he is a Mahapurush since he's this prominent, well-known individual. But can anybody see what indications are that he would actually be born into a royal family or, be of royal birth or at least a high status birth? Maybe not just royal, but a high status birth. What indicates this or what would indicate this?
Mark, this yoga that the ascendant, the moon, and the sun are in male signs for a male, and to be born on during the day. There is a yoga.
Mahabhagya Yoga.
Yeah, Mahabhagya Yoga.
Good. Anything else that think about?
Mark the Dasha sequence.
Well, say something about that, Pulak.
So he was born in the Sun Dasha, and Sun is in the 9th house in its own sign, strongly placed, forming a 9-10 Raj Yoga.
That's it. Okay. With the aspect of who?
Jupiter.
Right. So who are the royal planets? Who are the two, quote, royal planets?
Sun and moon.
Sun and the moon. And then who's the planet of, quote, dignity or dignified status?
Sun?
Jupiter.
And Jupiter also.
And so see what's going on here. Jupiter, Mahapurush Yoga, first lord in the first house, and its Mula Trikona house, aspecting both the sun and the moon. The sun, planet of royalty, so strong as the 9th lord in the 9th house, but involved in a 9-10 Raja Yoga. And then what Pulak saw was the Dasha sequence. The moon at 2741, he was born in Kritika Nakshatra ruled by the sun. So this is the way that it could be seen that he had a high birth, right? But now, is there any blemish on this Jupiter in the first house?
Saturn.
Saturn. Now, just some facts of his life that his chart sort of express, whereas it sadly indicate that he would lose his mother. He might lose his mother. There would be a tragedy involving his mother. Sorry? Vivek, you said something? I couldn't understand you. Or anyone else?
Saturn aspects both the Jupiter, the 4th lord, and moon, Karaka for mother.
Right.
This is one of the things, yeah.
Well,
Strong Saturn.
right. So first of all, we start with Karaka mother, and we get the aspect of Saturn. But then, Jupiter is not just the first lord, it's also the 4th lord, and then Saturn aspects then. But what does the Shastra tell us when we're evaluating experienced karma with mother that we also look at?
D12?
D12, but it's just stay with the birth chart. So with father, we not only looked at the 9th, go ahead, somebody.
Fourth from the moon.
4th from the
Yeah,
moon.
fourth from the moon. Yeah.
From the moon, and who becomes the 4th from the moon? The moon itself.
Yeah.
With this aspect of Saturn. And sadly, it was right in moon Saturn, period and subperiod, that this tragic event happened. And he's acknowledged that, the impact on him, he became a depressive as a result of this experience, which is what, moon Saturn contacts can give you, particularly falling here in the 5th house as it does. But then, how is it clear that moon Saturn becomes a tragic time for the mother in another way? How could this be seen? How does the moon Saturn period show danger to the mother in a way in which we've not yet discussed it?
Saturn becomes Marika for the moon. Like from the moon.
Yes, okay, well, right, it falls 7th from the moon in that way. What I'm getting at, folks, is that the way in which Sri Rao would look at this is that he would take the house pertaining to mother, which would be Pisces, the 4th house, see where those planets fell from there. In which case, the moon falls in the Marcus second house from Pisces, the fourth house, with this aspect of Saturn, and Saturn's the 12th lord, obviously goes to the 8th. So this is, you might say, a Jyotish way of seeing how that period proved so tragic with respect to his mother. Where in the chart is there some indication that he would be estranged from an older brother? First of all, who's the Karak of older brother?
Jupiter.
Jupiter.
Aspect of Saturn. What happens to the 11th house, 11th lord of brother? Older brother. Has the natural malefic Saturn in the 11th house. 11th lord is in its debilitation sign. And you might consider some issue of hemming there. One more point about this chart before I leave and go to another. Ken and I always talked about how the, birth charts and divisional charts have to prove themselves, right? And he would make adjustments to birth times based on sometimes adjusting a divisional chart to more clearly reflect the timing of some event relative to that. So he met and got engaged with Meghan Markle, the American actress, in his Rahu Mercury period and subperiod. Now, of course, Mercury is the 7th lord of the birth chart, but however, Rahu would, if this Navamsha Lagna is correct, Rahu would go to the 6th, but then he married her in Rahu Ketu. So, and remember, he married a foreigner, actually a darker skinned foreigner, you might say. And my supposition is, or my speculation, I should say, is that his Navamsha Lagna is actually Leo, in which case marriage to a foreigner in the Ketu Rahu Ketu period becomes very clear. And of course, Rahu in the 7th, if the 7th house is Aquarius, would also get the aspect of Jupiter, right? Now, again, this is a speculation on my part, but as my Jyotish group came around, I would say it appeals to me. Any other thoughts or comments about this before we move on? So this is an example of Jupiter as the Lagna lord in the Lagna. I want to bring up another one, which would be an especially good situation. And that would be the chart of this individual here, if I can find it. Yeah, there we go. Anybody recognize the name David Copperfield?
Magician.
Magician.
Yeah, viewed as being one of the greatest stage magicians, illusionists of all times. I was reading on Wikipedia, still at the age that he is, he does an enormous number of shows worldwide. He's had TV specials and, extremely successful, extremely famous stage musician, illusionist, right? So, I'm showing this chart obviously because here we have Mercury, the Lagna lord, in the Lagna, in its exaltation sign. It's past 15 degrees, so it's past its highest point of exaltation. But then also, one word for stage magic or illusion is what's called prestidigitation, right? Prestidigitation, where sleight of hand. And what would be a good combination for this that is involved in the Lagna here?
Okay. And what is the transit Jupiter's position as on today?
Someone's talking in the background. You need to mute your mic unless you're answering my question.
What's your natal Jupiter's position?
I can't understand you if you're responding to my question. I'm sorry. What yoga is involved in the ascendant here that would be good for sleight of hand, prestidigitation? That's my question.
Are you referring to the Buddha Ditya yoga? But
I am.
yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Especially if it is related to the
Yeah.
ascendant, yeah.
right, exactly. But now
Okay,
there is a yoga here that is not someone that's not very obvious here. But well, if you look at the dashas, what's the planet of illusion? What is the graha of illusion?
Rahu.
Rahu.
Rahu, of course, right? And you see at age 10 to age 28, he was performing stage magic to audiences, I think by the age of 12, right? So shortly after he moved into his Rahu major period, but by the time this period was over, he was world famous. So in other words, by what principles of Jyotish could we say that Rahu is going to give such a result?
Unusual Raj Yoga.
Unusual, why and how, Georgie?
Because of the two malefics in the third house. Remember that yoga.
Correct. And it goes more than that. I mean, just the malefics collecting in the Tri-Shaddai houses, 3, 6, and 11, you should have the understanding that this can give this kind of unusual type of Raja Yoga. But it goes beyond that. There's a yoga that says when there's malefics in the Tri-Shaddai and a strong benefic in the ascendant, then this is a special kind of yoga, and this is exactly what we see here, right? And then, why do these planets what else is going on here in terms of the Tri-Shaddai? Is it just Rahu and Saturn in the third?
the Parivartana between Mars and Saturn.
Right.
Mars in the sixth house, yeah, another.
Giving both Mars and Saturn a source of strength, but then you've got three of the three natural malefics in the Tri-Shaddais, 3 and 6. And this is how it was, you might say, predictable. And then, he's performing, it's stage magic, you're giving a performance. There it is, right in the third house with a very strong third lord. And you have to almost see this as being a combination of Mars, Saturn, and Rahu, all, activating this third house and activating this special kind of yoga. So
I wonder why he didn't become a sports person.
well, certainly it's a combination that could have given that, right? But obviously it didn't go in that direction. It's an interesting thing to consider. He did marry a foreigner, the supermodel Claudia Schiffer. He was born in the U.S. She was from Germany, where is a clear indication of both the fact that she might marry a foreigner and that there would be a break in the marriage.
7th Lord and 12th, aspected by Mars and Saturn.
Right. So you have Jupiter here, 7th Lord in the 12th, and not just the aspect of Mars and Saturn, but Mars is the 8th Lord, Saturn is the 6th Lord, right? I don't know if there's been other marriages. I just remembered that he had married the supermodel Claudia Schiffer from Germany, and that the marriage did break at some point. So again, example of a chart really being enhanced overall by the fact that you've got the Lagna Lord in the Lagna here, and there's this Buddha Ditya Yoga. Any other comments about this chart again before we move on? So obviously Mercury in its own sign Gemini in the Lagna would also produce a very good and well-placed Lagna Lord. I'm pulling up the chart of a very interesting man. People typically recognize the name because he lived during the time of Victoria, England. But you've probably all heard of the character of Indiana Jones, played by Harrison Ford, very famous series of movies. He's this archaeologist, this adventurer, right? The character of Indiana Jones was modeled after a fictional character that this man created called Alan Quatrain. And you maybe have heard about the famous novel that he wrote featuring this character and then has been made into movies called King Solomon's Mines. But he was a very popular author of these sorts of tales. He is credited with pioneering what's called the lost city sort of genre, where the adventurer is out to find some lost city. And what are some very distinguishing features of this birth chart? And in particular, some yogas that would incline one towards literary and artistic pursuits.
Saraswati Yoga.
There's a very strong Saraswati yoga, right? I mean, look at how all planets have sources of strength. Mercury, obviously, a literary planet, Lagna Lord in the Lagna, Gemini, a literary sign. And then you have Jupiter, the 10th Lord in the 10th house, strong in its own sign. And Venus here is strong in its Trikona sign in Navam. So all three components of the Saraswati Yoga are quite strong. And think about how many planets are in Kendras, right? Every one but the moon. This is a very, strong chart from that standpoint. And, if you consider Kendra Sambandha, as I do, then all these grahas are connected in that way. But then also what yogas exist in the first house. It's not just Mercury as the Lagna and the Lagna. What else is going on there?
The Maharaja Yoga?
This would be a blemished, but nonetheless it wouldn't be a true Maharaj Yoga because it requires that there, in addition to, say, in this case, the first and fifth lords being together in the first, there would have to be the strong influence of an additional natural benefic. If you consider Kendra Sambandha with Jupiter, maybe you would consider that to be the case. Of course, there's Saturn and the Sun there as well. Mercury might be said to be suffering from combustion there. But this combination of Venus, Mercury, and Saturn, what's it all a combination of?
The wealth combination?
Sorry?
Trine lords and wealth combination?
All trines, right? All trines. And, if you look at when he became, famous for his literary fictional works, this all happened in the Jupiter major period, which started and ran for 16 years from ages 23 to 39. And just sort of just quick another example of this, of what I'm showing you here.
Mark, the Mercury is just 1 degree outside of being Kazemi. Is there some Kazemi quality there, or is?
It's a good question. There may be, technically speaking, it should be, within less than a degree, but here you're right. It's just like 1 degree, 1 minute, not degree, 1 minute outside of that. So I would probably say so. I'd have to look more about what happened in the Mercury major period. I think he continued to produce, fictional works almost up until he passed. But, I just have to go back and look at that. So, who's Ian Fleming?
Another famous writer.
James
James Bond.
Right, he created the legendary character of James Bond, his claim to fame. And we see something similar in the sense that we've got the first and fifth lord Mercury and Venus together in the first house. Again, Venus is strong, going to its own sign, Taurus, in Navamsh. No question of combustion in this case. But of course, you have some other guys there too, right? You've got Mars and you've got Rahu. And if you looked at, and this is a perfect example of the way in which Rahu gives the results of any yogas that it's connected to and will give them especially strongly, even more strongly than the planets would themselves, that idea of Prabhalau in an exaggerated way. And what's Rahu's good condition here?
Mool Trikona.
It's Mula Trikona, right. And it was in the latter part of the Rahu period. The first Bond novels came out, I think started in, might have been in 56. I'd have to go check that for sure. But, certainly, he was writing them in either Rahu Moon and then Rahu Mars, but then moved into Jupiter and produced many more. And one of the reasons I wanted to just discuss this chart is something that students often miss. What's going on here when he runs Jupiter besides, well, what's the more obvious thing that goes on here about Jupiter and why it could make him notable, make him someone that people had heard of, make him prominent, at least in certain circles? What yoga?
Kesari yoga.
It's a good case for yoga, right? Jupiter falling 10th from the moon, obviously strong here in its exaltation sign, but what other yoga is it a part of?
Is it Barry yoga? I don't know if the nodes are included in that.
They're not, unfortunately. So Ketu in the 7th here would not qualify. But obviously there's an enormous amount of planets collecting around the Lagna, which has its own meaning in that way. But I'm referring to something else, something that would, by the time, you see, they started making movies about and that's when, the novels just became really, really popular, right? And this sort of, this extended from the 50s into the 60s. But I'm looking at some yoga that Jupiter would also participate in here that might be easy to miss.
Is it Saraswati yoga?
Well, you're asking a question. Do you think it gives Saraswati yoga here?
Yes.
Absolutely, it did. You've got Mercury and Venus in the first and Jupiter in the second. So, there is the Saraswati yoga here, which, is all part of that picture in terms of what he eventually became, an author, right? And then, but that's not what I'm referring to.
In the Jupiter as a Mahadasha Lord, it'd be a Gajikesari.
Well, yes, in the sense that from Dasha Lagna, the moon it would be the first lord in the 10th. So I would agree with that. Drew, if you have a thought this way?
Mark, maybe it's like Jupiter and Saturn being the 9th and 10th lord, they are connected in a way because Saturn is in Jupiter sign aspected by Jupiter.
That's it. Very good. When I say, a yoga that oftentimes overlooked, it's one that's formed when one planet is in the sign of some planet and then aspected by this planet. And this is one of the best things that, the best versions of that, one of the best versions of that can happen. Because here, of course, Saturn is the 9th lord in the 10th, giving this combination by itself, but then it's in Jupiter's sign aspected by Jupiter. And then whose nakshatra is Jupiter in? Saturn's Udu's clue. So when he runs Jupiter, basically it's a 9-10 Raja Yoga, as Dhruv said, in this way. And therefore, when activated in Jupiter Saturn, very clearly predictable that he would have great fame and success during this time. Any questions about that?
Yeah.
Mark, it was actually similar to the previous horoscope also. Was he ever married?
He was. He had affairs though. He was married. I know he had affairs. Where's the indication? He obviously was from England. He was a British citizen, but he lived basically in a foreign place, although I think at the time it was a colony of England. Where's the clear indication, and this would happen in Rahu, where's the clear indication of something? He wrote his novels from this place. He wrote the Bond novels from this location. Where's the clear indication of, foreign settlement?
Well, the fourth house is malefically blemished, plus Rahu is with the fourth, so.
That's exactly it. Natural malefics influencing the 5th house, 5th lord, will take you away from your place of birth. This is Ken Rao's research I found to be very valid, but then the influence of Rahu onto Mercury, the 4th lord. And it was in his, as I mentioned, I think he wrote he did write most of the novels in Jamaica, certainly the first one. that he wrote. I think it was Dr. No, came from there. Okay, so that's all I wanted to share with regards to this. So, natural malefics as the first lord in the first house can also be equally good, particularly if they're well associated. And so I'm pulling up an example of that. This is the chart of former U.S. President Gerald Ford, which I'm sure many of you have seen already. But we see here Aries Lagna with Mars as the first lord in the first house. And what very good thing then additionally happens to it?
Aspect from Jupiter.
Aspect of not just Jupiter, but
from Jupiter, yes.
From Jupiter and as the ninth lord. Obviously, a very good planet for, so what are some other distinguishing features of this chart that sort of catch your eye? Look at on both sides of the log. You would not consider this hemming because of a strong Venus there. This is not pure malefic hemming by any means. And, by the way, he was a football star in his Mercury major period. Playing at the University of Michigan, he was a lineman. I think he played the position of the guard. Why would the Mercury major period be getting involved in sports athletics?
It's the third and sixth lord, sports and competition.
It's the third and sixth lord. This would have been happening in Mercury, Jupiter. Now, as you all know, he did become a president of the United States, but in a very unusual way. He was vice president under President Richard Nixon, and when Richard Nixon resigned the office, he then, being vice president, moved into that office, did not win a second term. And some of you may remember, because I've shown this example, it happened in Moon Saturn. And so, again, by what principles of Jyotish?
Parashara exception, yes.
Yeah, this is a pure example of Parashara's example. Because, you look in the face of this here, oh my gosh, it's the moon, it's in its debilitation sign, it goes in the 8th house. But as Kane Rao said, when you have Raja yogas involving the 8th house, you rise up when somebody has fallen down. And that is exactly what happened here. And just a moment, Parashara exception, it's emphasized, at least in the Shastra, that the Lagna Lord, should be strong and well placed, which of course it is here. And, this is a debilitated planet in a Dushtana when that is the case, and it gave this very unusual, but the elevation came in an unusual way, where Nixon had to fall in order for him to be raised up. But one thing I like to show about this example, some people maybe have seen it before. Aditya, did you have a question or comment before I go further? I saw your hand up.
Yes, I just want to ask if Mars is aspecting its own house where Moon is, does that make it better, the debilitation?
Well,
cancels it, but
you tell me. Should it?
I'd imagine yes, that's it.
Well, it's a factor for Nichabanga, right?
Yes.
So, of course, we know when, a planet, an debilitated planet is in the sign of some planet, it gets the aspect of that sign lord that's given in the ancient classes to be one form of Nichabanga, cancellation. But the point I like to make about his moon period and how it was capable of making him president of the U.S., you want to see Moon Saturn in Navamsha. And in which case, what would you notice about Moon Saturn in Navamsha?
They're 110 from each other.
Well, not only that, you're right, they're 110 from each other, but as what lords? Is it just because they're Moon Saturn 110 from each other?
Yes, 510.
510.
Well, first of all, you have the moon as the 10th lord and the first in a mutual glance with the Lagna lord. Moon Venus combination for any Libra ascendant is a very, very good Raja Yoga. It's a 110 Raja Yoga. Then Saturn is the Yogacaraka planet, fourth and fifth lord, going to the 10th in the moon, in the sign of the moon. My point being that this moon may have brought some rise, giving the great Parashara's exception, but to give this kind of rise and put him in this kind of position, if the moon and Saturn are not as they are here in D9, this would not have happened. And then you have to see D10. Now what do you notice? Same thing. Moon's the 10th lord in the first. Saturn is the Yogacaraka in the 10th. Now the moon is combining with the 10th. That's the 9-10 combination. And of course, what came after Moon Saturn, Moon Mercury, and he's president of the United States during this time. At the same time, he fell. He lost the election to Carter. Right? And he didn't have 2 terms. So this is an example of a natural malefic as a Lagnord and a Lagnord, but being a very good situation. I'll show one more with regards to Saturn. I'm going to bring up a chart of my friend and colleague, a fellow astrologer, whose name you should probably all recognize. Maybe you've read his book on birth time rectification, maybe taken his course. And I'm talking about Von Paul Manley. Von Paul, where are you? Here. So we talked about how when you have the Lagna Lord in the Lagna, whether it's a natural malefic or natural benefic, you automatically have a Mahapurush Yoga. And you've heard from me that you always want to see where these planets additionally fall from the moon and the sun. It's best if they're also at an angle from there. It's not the case here, although from the moon, it does fall in a good trine from there. Of course, there's the additional influence of Jupiter, which is getting Nietzsche Banga because of its affiliation with its sign lord. And then what sort of significant yoga are Jupiter and Saturn involved in? Graha Yoga.
Virinci Yoga?
Why Virinci Yoga?
Because the Jupiter, Saturn, and the fifth lord should be in Kendras or trines, and it is in that case.
Right.
One of these yogas for spirituality. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you want these planets in strength.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Saturn particularly strong here?
Or Gautama.
And then what's Jupiter's source of strength besides it being Nietzsche Banga?
Digbala in the first.
And Aquarius in D9.
And what about the fifth lord Venus?
Vargotama.
Directional strength.
And directional.
Directional strength. All the components of this are quite strong. And of course, starting, and then I see how the Dasha favored him. Age 33 starts running 16 years of Jupiter, followed by 19 years of Saturn, which is still going on. Who rules time? What's the planet that rules Kal? Time.
Saturn.
Saturn. I've always found it very interesting that, he's, I can do the kind of birth time rectification that he does. I don't particularly like to because it's so time consuming and rather tedious. He actually enjoys it. And it's become like this speciality of his, as you know. And he wrote the book. And of course, when did he write that book and when did he publish that book? Right in Saturn, Venus. Right in Saturn, Venus, giving the fruit of that Virinci Yoga. And Von Paul has a lot of students as well. He's a good teacher, and that's one thing that good Virinci Yoga can give you. Good, other good students. So very interesting example from that point of view. But if you're going to have Saturn in any sort of condition, this is like one of the conditions you'd want to put it in, particularly since, what kind of combination is this from the moon? What's
Raja Yoga for
4, 5.
4,
4,
5.
5.
Right. Now remember, he authored during this time. So Saturn is the fifth lord in the fifth house with Jupiter, planet of Veda and Vedanta, and also a literary planet, authorship planet. And then the subperiod was Venus, of course, who's this Vargotama, directional strength, fifth lord. So you see how Saturn, Venus, and this is what, Von Paul is known in the world of Jyotish, or he's known in general in the world of Jyotish, but what he's particularly known for is this book that he produced, Birth Time Rectification. So, very interesting example of the Lagna Lord and the Lagna being this Sasha Yoga Saturn in its own sign and Vargotama. Okay. So, any thoughts or questions about this before I move on? All right. So no one's going to recognize this person unless you're my age, meaning if you're an old person. Some guys, somebody maybe Randall, I don't know. Randall, you recognize his name?
Cowboy TV star?
I think it's absolutely.
One of the great dancers too.
And the Christmas song, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, he was the one that did that. And, I remember reading this interesting anecdote that, he thought it wouldn't be a good idea for him because it doesn't fit with his image. He was this, cowboy who was appearing in all these movies. He was a singing cowboy, appearing in all these movies. But his wife persuaded him, and this is actually one of the things he's famous for being the first person to record the Christmas song, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. But he was very successful in movies and then ended up quite wealthy, primarily as a result of owning a number of, TV and radio stations. So this is an example of a good situation when you would have the Lagna Lord in the second house, right? And again, forming what kind of yogas?
Done yogas.
Well, they're forming done yogas, not just that. And of course, we have a very, very strong second lord and 11th lord. You all know that for anyone with Leo Lagna, Mercury can be a wealth giver under certain conditions. And certainly we have the condition here where that could be the case. Obviously, Mercury's not just in its exaltation sign, but what else is going on here?
Mercury is Vargotama.
Mercury's Vargotama. And then, Venus is debilitated here, but obviously extremely Nichabanga. It's with an exalted planet, and what else?
It's in its own sign in Navamsh.
And what's the condition of the sun?
Exalted in D9.
Exalted in D9. You see the condition of these planets? And then even these planets are aspected by Saturn, but even does Saturn have any source of strength that you see?
Exchange in D9.
Right. Now, you've all heard from me that what oftentimes can separate an ordinary horoscope from an extraordinary one is the Navamsha and the condition of the planets in the Navamsha. Look at this. Sun exalted, Venus Swakshetra, Rahu, both Mula Trikona and Vargotama, Saturn involved in an exchange, Mercury, Vargotama exalted, Mars and Jupiter exchange here. Mars is Vargotama, and the moon is involved. Every one of these planets in Navamsha are in some sort of special condition. This is the only, I've seen Navamshas where there's a predominance of planets that are in a special condition. I've not seen any Navamsha except this one where everyone is, which means that any yogas that are being formed in the birth chart are going to give their results extremely strongly. But it's one of the better conditions that I've seen of a planet who's it's the first lord in the second. Now, even the yoga, are there any yogas? Saturn here, of course, is not the best of planets for this Lagna. It's the seventh and sixth lord. But well, I forgot what I wanted to say about that. But anyway, this is the idea of this chart is the idea of a really good situation where the first lord goes to the second. Now, I think he started getting famous actually in the Saturn period. By what principle of Jyotish would Saturn give this? Might have started in Jupiter, but I believe it started in Saturn in the mid-1930s. And throughout, Saturn was the period where he was most known again for being this featured in, I forget, it was over 100 films or something like that, where he's playing this singing cowboy. What principle of Jyotish could, because you look this from the birth Lagna, it's the sixth and seventh lord and the eighth. But what?
From moon, it is
Mark?
from moon, it's in the 10th house, ninth lord and 10th.
It's the ninth lord and 10th, but is that all?
Well, you can always say that it's actually in mutual aspect with the Raja Yoga Karaka Mars. So
It is.
It gets aspected by exalted Jupiter.
Well, again, it's a situation where we have Saturn and Jupiter sign aspected by an exalted Jupiter, but you really don't predict this unless from Chandra Lagna, because then Saturn is the ninth lord and the 10th in a mutual glance with who?
Mercury. Third lord. Third lord as well.
First and fourth lord. Third lord becomes the sun, this exalted sun in Navamsha. Remember, he was a movie star. Well, my point is that Saturn, Venus, and Mercury are all the trine lords. Of course, from Gemini, Mercury is also becoming an angle lord. So think about the angle trine combinations and non-yoga combinations that happen from the moon when he runs Saturn. Now, what else is going on between this Saturn and Jupiter that then just adds to this? Again, from the, just like in the chart of Ian Fleming, who had Gemini Lagna, same situation. He had Saturn in the 10th from there, aspected by this exalted Jupiter. But what else is going on here that connects Jupiter and Saturn even more?
There's a nakshatra exchange.
Good, Angus, absolutely. Saturn's in Jupiter's nakshatra, Jupiter's in Saturn's nakshatra. But again, this highlights the importance of Chandra Lagna. Anything else before we move on? All right. One of my favorite examples of Lagna Lord in the third is in this chart. What is considered by many to be the greatest novel ever written? And one of the biggest. Anybody have any idea about that? War and Peace.
War and Peace.
By Leo Tolstoy. He was born, among the nobility of Russia at that time and was quite wealthy. But I'm going to say more about that, a little later on. But where there's a combination in this chart that clearly shows the potential for wealth. Mm-hmm.
5-9 in the second.
5-9 in the second. And what do they become from the moon, Georgie?
Oh, now they're in the 11th. And now 5-9 again.
How about that, huh?
Yeah.
So you see that potential there. But he had what yoga here obviously was very conducive for him being a literary person involving the Lagna Lord. Do people see that this is a very good Buddha yoga?
Buddha-Aditya yoga.
Now, again, for those who are maybe somewhat new, others have heard me maybe repeat this too often, any Sun-Mercury combination is not a Buddha-Aditya yoga. What has to be present here in that combination in order for it to be what the classics referred to as Buddha-Aditya yoga, which means splendor of the intellect?
Involvement of Lagna Lord or Fifth Lord or the houses.
Yeah, it must in some way involve the first house, first lord, fifth house, fifth lord. So by virtue of the fact that Mercury is the Lagna Lord here, this is what qualifies in this case, right? And where is another combination in this chart that could indicate a significant authorship?
Jupiter in the fifth.
10th Lord, Jupiter in the fifth. That's exactly right. And it was in his Jupiter major period, I forget the sub-period, might have been Jupiter Mercury, that he published War and Peace. One of the reasons, I was a literature major in college, and I was interested to find out that one of the reasons that novels from the 19th century, meaning in the 1800s, is one of the reasons, like Dickens' novels, and I could cite others as well, Tolstoy's novels, but many other authors. The reason they were so long is because they were serialized. They were first published not as a whole volume, but in segments. And some of the authors were actually getting paid by the page. So there was motivation to make your novel long because it would make you more money. Something that I thought was a rather interesting anecdote. All right. So I want to now show one of the better situations possible for somebody who has no, wait a second. What did I want to do here? Hold on. I wanted to show the chart of Gavin Newsom, but it's not an example of the first lord and the fourth. Hold on. So Gavin Newsom, from those people in the U.S., who's Gavin Newsom? Anybody know?
Governor of California.
Yes. And among the Democratic Party, potentially a presidential hopeful in the 2028 election coming up. So, so what do we see here that's notable? What strikes you as being notable features of this chart?
The Shubha Ubhayachari Yoga?
Yes, involving the first lord and the second, which, of course, the classics talk about, and it involves the Lagna Lord, right? So in the classics of Jyotish, as you know, kind of refer to this as a lot of different combinations as being potentially king-making, right? Or which just means you can put yourself in a high-status position. So yes, one thing that's notable is a first lord in the second involved in this Shubhupachara yoga. What else?
Fifth Lord and 10th Lord together in Lagna.
Yes. And you can see that, I think he's in a second term, I believe. In his second term, I think he was elected in Jupiter, Venus. You've heard me say, folks, that Raja Yogas, particularly 5-10 Raja Yogas, are combinations that if they're in a good situation, condition, well placed, they can really put you in positions of authority, right? Fifth house being the house of Raja, as you all heard me say many times. So that's what we have here. We have Venus as a 10th lord in the first. That's Raja Yoga by placement. Jupiter is the 5th lord in the first. That's Raja Yoga by placement, but then it's a 5-10 combination. And it's been in Jupiter major period that he has been the governor of California, which, California's economy is like, I think, the 18th in the world, despite in terms of world economies and countries. California being the largest state in the U.S. and with all its resources and so forth, it's a very to be the governor of California is a more substantial position to be in any other governor of any other state is the point that I'm making. And I'm intrigued by the idea of, well, see how the Dasha sequence unfolded. Does anybody know which graha the classics identify as being the significator of wine? Which is
Venus?
Sorry?
Venus?
No.
Is it
Is
Rahu?
it moon?
Mars, actually.
Mars. Okay.
And what's interesting about this is that, he graduated, see, Mars, of course, is a very well-placed Yogacaraka planet here. It's the ninth and the fourth lord's strong in its fourth house. And, he graduated undergraduate during this time, and his father, who was a judge, knew some really wealthy billionaire type, venture capitalist type individual. And they got connected. He wanted to start vineyards. He wanted to start going to business making wine, which he did. And then he actually created and marketed a series of what's called wine bars, where basically people go and drink wine, right? And very successfully so, and became quite wealthy. But then he ran Rahu, and it was during this period that he started getting into politics and rising up politically. Whose results does Rahu give?
Expositor Mars.
Primarily it's positive time because good aspect of Jupiter. But, so we see that's happening there. And then again, he's become governor of California in the major period of this fifth lord involved in a 5-10 Raja Yoga. So this was actually another example of the second lord in the first lord in the second, right? Okay, so just let me consult my notes here. This chart some of you have seen before, maybe not all of you, but I like to show this chart with respect to one of the more interesting Lagna lords in the fifth that I've ever come across. And she's given me permission to show her chart, so I don't mind showing the name here. It's this woman that you've heard participate in these seminars. Her name is Nilima, wonderful, just a wonderful woman. Her and her husband have both been doctors, retired now. They would go on, missions to India and help perform operations at no cost to people. They're just, wonderful souls. Nilima, where are you? Well, I can't spell today, apparently. Where are you, Nilima? Here he is. Okay. So, what do you notice about this first lord and the fifth?
Maharaja.
It's a Maharaj Yoga.
It is a Maharaja Yoga, right? And of course, you have the sun as the fifth lord in the fifth with Mars, the Lagna lord, not really suffering from any combustion there. You do have the additional influence of a natural benefic Venus. But then, what really makes this fifth house, fifth lord, Lagna lord combination quite exceptional is what?
The Shubha Bhattacharya Yoga, essentially. Many yogas inside.
Right. You've got two exalted benefics on both sides of that. Benefic hemming of the house, but of course, since the sun is there, and you'd think they would have illustrious sons, and they do, both of whom are surgeons, right? And obviously, she has just a remarkable intellect. She learned to chant by heart all verses of the first 12 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. If you can imagine. That's like one of those memory feats that you hear about of pundits in Vedic times anciently. Now, she, among millions and millions of others, are currently, or maybe has already been, at the Kumbh Mela. So how does something like the moon period show her taking a holy dip in the Ganges? in what would be, a foreign country. She was born in India, but, moved here to the U.S. and has been here in the U.S. ever since her early adulthood.
Moon is in the 12th house of foreign lands.
In a water sign,
Mm.
and what's going on with this Jupiter?
The exchange between Moon and Jupiter.
Right. So again, we have, the exchange between Moon and Jupiter, which now this is the fourth lord and the 12th in exchange with the 12th lord. This shows her emigration, right, her foreign settlement. But, right now, I just find it interesting that, it's in Pisces, a moksha sign, it's a water sign, it's the 12th house, and it has such a strong influence of Jupiter, who's both the 12th and the 9th lord, right?
Mark, she's running Moon, Rahu, and all three moksha houses are getting activated, and Jupiter aspects both the 12th and the 8th and is in the 4th.
Very good. And Ian Rao would always say that when it comes to spiritual activities, Rahu is an extrovert, Ketu is an introvert. And he said, what he meant by extroverted spirituality is when you take pilgrimages. And Rahu is specifically identified in that small Sanskrit classic of Bhavarta Ratnakara as being, kark of pilgrimages under the right conditions. Getting this aspect of the 9th lord Jupiter would be like one of those right conditions, right? Good observation, Pulak. Thank you for that. Okay. So I specifically wrote articles about the trick houses. People may recall these, to give students a more balanced view of some results that they can give. Sure, they are dushtanas, they're trick houses, and everyone knows the kind of experiences that, the suffering type of experiences that can come out of those. But, under the right conditions, they can obviously also, planets there can give very good results. So Lagna Lord in the 6th is what I want to show here, where some very good results ensued. Sonny Bono. Here. So for those who don't know, Sonny Bono was a part of a singing duo. Him and his wife, Cher, were a very famous singing duo starting in the 1960s. At one point, they had their own variety, sort of musical variety, comedy variety TV show, very successful. And he went on to actually get into politics and ended up as being a U.S. congressman. But if you look at his chart, you see Mercury as the Lagna Lord in the 5th house. But what? What kind of combination is this? These planets in the 4th house.
Well, all the trine words, right?
They're all the trine lords. And then what's the best Raja Yoga combination for anybody with Virgo Lagna?
Venus, Mercury, yeah.
Mercury, Venus, right? And, just a side comment about this combination, some of you know that there's a Pravraj yoga for spiritual renunciation given in Prashravara, where, 4 planets in a house involving the 10th Lord, but then it says if the 10th Lord is combust, then this would not give this result. And this is what we see here. We've got 4 planets in a house, and we've got the 10th Lord Mercury, but if you see the degrees of Mercury in the sun, now this would be that Kazimi position that I'm talking about, but still this would nullify that yoga. And so, when was his great rise in the musical world? It happened right in Venus, as you can imagine. And the height of that was when they had their own TV show, which was it coincided exactly with the 3 years of Venus Mercury. Now I want to highlight that there's in Laghu Parashari, who some of you have seen my commentary on that, it says that when the Lord of a strong angle combines with the Lord of a strong trine, this makes a very good yogic combination. That's what Venus Mercury here. But then it goes on to say, how much better then when it is joined by the Lord of the other trine. And of course, Saturn is the sixth lord here, but it's also the fifth lord. So this is that combination, and you can see the result that it gave. Venus can give its results strongly. Why?
Swakshetra in Navamsha.
And then see it in D10. Again, Swakshetra. So qualifying yogas, we always want to see strength, and you find that this Venus has a very strong Vimshapaka Bala, given these strong placements in key divisional charts like Navamsha and D10. But Lagna Lord in the sixth can also give what kind of unfavorable yoga? If under the right conditions, what would that be? Unfavorable yoga, Lagna Lord in the sixth.
Arista?
Of course, it can give Arista, as it did in this chart of a French movie star woman. This French actress first came to fame at a very young age when she was in a movie, rather controversial movie called The Last Tango in Paris with the legendary movie star Marlon Brando. This was back in the early 70s. It's one of those instances where, at too young of an age, too much fame and fortune is sometimes very difficult for a person to handle, which turned out to be the case here. So what's going on here that would make this Lagna Lord in the sixth actually an Arishta Yoga?
The Lagna Lord Mercury is in an exchange with Saturn, and it's conjunct Rahu.
Right. There's an exchange between 1 and 6. It has the additional influence of Rahu, and I would consider it somewhat combustier, just 5 degrees from the sun, and the sun rules which house? This is the Lagna Lord with the 12th Lord in the 6th house under the influence of Rahu and in an exchange with the 6th Lord itself. Now take Saturn's aspect as being retrograde is not just in Virgo, but also from Leo, and you add to that picture, right? Which ironically, it forms some Raja Yoga combination, but it was in K2 Saturn. And I think this movie, maybe it was K2 Jupiter, I forget, but she got drug addicted and really spiraled down in terms of her mental health. And actually there was a suicide attempt. What would have saved her here? Because she then, she did survive. She got clean. She got off drugs, and went on to have, I think she starred in like over 50 movies, most of them French. What's the saving grace here?
Jupiter with the moon and aspecting Saturn.
Very strong aspect of Jupiter. Some of you've heard me quote from the chapter in Prashahora that the influence of the strong Jupiter on the Lagna Lord destroys Arishta the way in which a single glance of Lord Shiva destroys 10,000 sins, something like that. And I thank God for that myself because I have this very combination, Saturn in the ascendant as the 6th Lord aspected by Jupiter, not retrograde. That's a key point. So
I remember too, Mark, I think didn't Sonny Bono die early in a plane crash?
Wasn't a plane crash, ski accident. He was skiing and got out of control, ran into a tree and died. It was in his Jupiter major period. It's a Marika, or I have to go back and see what it was, but Marika periods were running during that time. Okay, so how many people are aware of a service offered online in terms of organizing pujas and yagyas for people called puja.net? It's been in existence for some time, and it was founded and is then owned and operated, you might say, by an individual that was a personal friend of mine, and we were first met when we were both teachers of transcendental meditation in the Chicagoland area.
I know of it, Mark.
Yeah, so his name is Ben Collins, wonderful guy. And you know, the Prashara Horror gives us a hint about one's, you might say, occupation or career or professional in a previous lifetime. And it hints that, you know, eighth house factors associated with the eighth house can give that result. Who are the Brahmins? Who are Brahmins among the grahas? Who are the Brahmins?
Jupiter and Venus.
Jupiter and Venus. And you see they're in his eighth house. Ben had the very, you know, see, we both moved out to California. I'm down in the San Diego area. He moved to the LA area. There's a very famous and really amazing South Indian temple in Malibu near LA. He started going there and he started really getting to know the priest, and he started actually sort of, they started letting him assist at some of the rituals. Make a long story short, in his Jupiter major period, he was actually initiated as a Brahmin, which is highly unusual. You know, this is a typical thing that only happens when you're actually born into a family of Brahmins. And I jokingly kind of tease him, I call him Brahmin Ben for this reason. And this happened right in the Jupiter major period. May have actually happened around Jupiter Venus. I'm not exactly sure. Right? But it's been in his Jupiter major followed by Saturn that he's, you know, founded this website, you know, got priests and Indians, Sattvic priests, and he's actually supported quite a few priests and Brahmin priests in India as a result of this, and has actually built a temple from the proceeds of this himself. So kind of a very interesting, somewhat unusual destiny regards to this, right? But, you know, with regards to the first lord in the seventh house, what's a not very favorable combination here for stability in one's married life?
It's with Mars.
Why would that be a problem? Besides it being a natural malefic.
Eighth lord.
And what's going on between the seventh and the eighth lords?
Exchange.
Right. So first of all, we have, you know, the first lord in the seventh house can make you very religious relationship oriented, which, you know, he was. But you've all heard me talk about how exchanges between 7 and 8, and particularly an involvement of something like Mars as an eighth lord, not good planet for Virgo, can be you know, especially challenging that way. You know, I'm not going to go into detail in terms of his personal life that way, but the first lord in the seventh can also give what kind of favorable yoga? As I showed in the chart of Taylor Swift in the article. First lord in the seventh gives what kind of yoga? No one?
Raja yoga.
Yeah, it's just the, you know, always remember that the first lord is both an angle and a trine lord. So just the first lord in the seventh by itself, you know, gives Raja yoga. Now in Ben's case, you know, he won't, well, he'll move into Mercury in 2026, which is not that fun. He's been running Saturn, and you see this is an exalted Saturn as the fifth lord in the second, you know, in getting the aspect of both Jupiter and Venus here. Of course, which house and which house lord pertains to something like rituals such as pujas and homas? Which house and
Fifth
house?
house?
Sorry?
Fifth house?
Well, the fifth house would have to do with the chanting of mantras that go with that, which is, of course, a huge part of that. But the ritual itself would not be indicated by the fifth house.
Ninth house?
Ninth.
Ninth house, ninth lord. And then what would be the karaka of these things?
Jupiter.
Jupiter. So you can see there the significance of this combination all along the 2-8 axis, right? Kind of very
Lagna Adi Yoga as well?
well, partially. It'd be both Chandra and Lagna Adi Yoga. There's no benefic in the 6th, but the benefics do fall in 7 and 8. So, this would be what I would call partial. But now, somebody, I think was you, Angus, or maybe it was Randall, mentioned some yoga earlier that you asked me if it applied to the chart. It didn't. But what about this? There's grahas in the 1st, 6th, 7th, and 8th.
That's the Barra Yoga?
That's the Barra Yoga. That's exactly right. I'm sorry. It's missing the planet in the 12th. I'm sorry. So you'd have to have, no, wait a second. Yeah, for Barra Yoga, there'd have to be a planet in the 12th. So that, my apologies, that does not apply here. But, you have a partial, both Chandra and Lagna Yoga, as you mentioned. Okay. So, for which Lagna is it best to have the first lord in the 8th?
Would it be Aries?
That's not a bad statement, because of course that would put the 1st and 8th lord in the 8th house itself, right? But something
Sagittarius?
better. Why Sagittarius?
Because then Jupiter would be exalted in the 8th house.
Right. This is a chart of a young girl young woman, I should say, in her early 20s, who had her chart at birth. And the first thing I had to determine was whether she was actually Sagittarius or Capricorn ascendant. Couldn't determine that until her life unfolded to some degree. It's absolutely certain in my mind that it's Sagittarius. In which case, what's going on here with this Lagna Lord? Aside from the fact that it's the Lagna Lord in the 8th and its exaltation sign, what else is going on here? Any yogas being formed here? Please, somebody talk to me.
Yeah, the 110 Raja Yoga in the 8th house.
So there's a 110 Raja Yoga taking place here, involving the first lord Jupiter and the 10th lord Mercury. That's a substantial yoga. And what else is happening here with these two planets in the Cancer?
Jupiter, the Lagna Lord's also aspected by its sign lord, Moon.
In forming what yoga?
Gauri Yoga.
Gajakesari.
Let's call it Kesari Yoga, since Jupiter's not fall in an angle both from the birth lagna and the moon. But this is a good Kesari Yoga. The moon is just past fullness. And, I've highlighted Kesari Yogas that happen between the moon and Jupiter, when Jupiter's actually in the moon's sign, which is what's happening here. And then there's the additional influence of the natural benefic. As we said, Jupiter and Mercury form a 110 Raja Yoga. And you can see that this young girl, who's a very, very accomplished musician, she both piano and the harp, she has been going to be graduating this year from one of the top music schools in the world, really, the Manhattan School of Music, where she's been on a full scholarship all 4 years. She plays the harp like an angel. And you can see in a year's time now, she's going to move into that Jupiter major period. Now, what's not favorable about Mercury here in one sense? It's the 7th lord and the 8th, which again can be challenging from the relationship standpoint, particularly since you've got the sixth Lord Karaka Venus in the seventh with Saturn is the biggest problem here. But what sort of yogas get formed by these combinations that she's actually been having the benefit of in her Rahu major period? What favorable yogas are forming here in the seventh? A particular variety of yoga.
It's Dana Yoga.
Why?
Well, you have the combination of the 2nd, 11th, the 9th.
And what about strength of planets?
Oh, pretty good. Sun Vargotama, Venus exalted from Navamsha, and Saturn own sign in Navamsha.
Right. Exceptional Dana yogas, which is involving the 11th Lord, which is why she's been able to, the scholarship, the yearly scholarship that she won, the only one of its kind for that school, what's called the President's Scholarship, $60,000, worth $60,000 a year. I'd predicted that she would actually win this in her Rahu Venus period, which she did. So, and her chart is another example of a lot of good placements, a lot of strong planets in Navamsha. You can see Jupiter not only exalted in the birth chart, but Swa in Navamsha, Venus exalted, Sun Vargotama, Mars Vargotama, Saturn in its own sign. So, again, the planets that are forming yogas there. And look how now it becomes Gajikeshwar yoga in Navamsha. A rather good one in the sense that Jupiter's strong and it's got the additional influence of this benefic Venus, right? Okay.
Mark, that's the Karakamsha and the Navamsha.
Oh, sorry. I'm always looking at the South Indian style chart. Yeah, the Karakamsha Lagna here, obviously, it's because the Atmakaraka sun is Vargotama, it's going to be Gemini. The actual Navamsha Lagna would be Sagittarius. Very good Saraswati yoga in the Navamsha, right?
Okay. Now the Venus becomes with directional strength also on top of being exalted.
It does. I'll be interested to see what happens with this career. She's going to graduate this year. She may end up doing, additional graduate work. And one thing that, obviously the Lagna Lord in the eighth can do for you, and has done for her, strong interest in psychology. In fact, she'd considered doing kind of like obviously she's a musician, she's majoring in music, but she's done coursework in psychology as well. Okay, so
I was having a hard time seeing the musical side of it from the Lagna, but then when you saw the Navamsha, that explained it.
Yeah, what I've discovered is that Venus disconnected to the Lagna Lord can give music, which it did in this case. And again, Venus is the planet of music and is very, very strong here, as you can see. Her mother is a musician, her father is a musician, her brother is a musician. It's a family of musicians. All right, so Lagna Lord in the ninth, obviously one of the best placements you can have, the best trine to have the Lagna Lord there, as you see here in the chart of the famous sitar master, Ravi Shankar. Right? Lagna Lord goes to the ninth. What's particularly good about it? Besides just being the Lagna Lord in the ninth, what else is it? Hello?
Well, mutual aspect with the ninth word. So
mutual aspect of the ninth Lord forming what kind of yoga?
Raja and Dana Yoga.
Raja and Dana Yoga, and then does it have any source of strength? Mercury.
Own sign in Navamsha.
Own sign in Navamsha. And he was originally a dancer, and in his Mercury major period, No, he was studying sitar, and he was studying music as well, but his original passion was for dance. Where do you see here a combination that could incline you towards dance? And which house is ruled by dance? Which house lord?
The third house.
Third
Third lord
house.
to the 10th.
Third lord goes to the 10th. So, we had Mercury up until age 31. Of course, then he gets K2, but then talk about getting the right dash at the right time of life, right in his, height of his maturity, you might say. He runs the 20 years of Venus, and this is where he becomes a worldwide famous sitar master. Also famous for his association with George Harrison, the Beatle, George Harrison. Now, what's really exceptional about this Venus?
Exalted.
Besides being exalted. With an exalted planet, what you always want to do is you want to see what happens to its sign lord. And in this case,
exalted, and it also aspects Venus.
yes, see how they're connected. See how this becomes a 5-10 combination by Venus being the 5th lord in the 10th, in Jupiter's sign, the 10th lord, aspected by an exalted 10th lord. In Jyotish, we talk about the prosperity or the lack thereof of a house. How do we judge that? Of course, by the influences of the house. And of course, we want to see, first of all, the planets that occupy that. We have the exalted natural benefic here, and we have the sun, which of course is getting directional strength, no question of combustion. And both of these are in the sign of the 10th house, getting the aspect of its own lord who happens to be exalted. No blemish of natural malefics on this 10th house, 10th lord at all. And this is how
Mark, there is also Saraswati yoga, I can see.
Well, of course. A really, really strong Saraswati yoga. Again, we saw Mercury as being in its own sign in Navamsha, Venus in its exaltation sign here, Jupiter in its exaltation sign. Really brilliant Saraswati yoga that also repeats from the moon, where now Mercury goes to the 4th, Venus in the 5th, and Jupiter's in the 9th.
Eric, the third lord from the moon it also repeats. So Saturn is the third lord from the moon and goes to the 10th.
That's a good observation. Absolutely. Okay. So I'm running out of time here, but I wanted to show this chart. Not a famous person, but actually a newborn. And it's a great nephew of mine, one of my nephews, and actually someone who's also my godson, recently had their first child. And of course, I was very interested to see the chart. And you could look at it in a couple different ways in terms of favorableness. Where is there somewhat a unusual and rather unique yoga in this chart that that kicked in at age 5 months? He was born, you can see, in K2 Mercury. But and I want to say something about that in a moment. But what sort of unusual yoga is being formed in this chart? I doubt if people will get this. So there's, the Nabasa yogas, right? These celestial pattern yogas that I've written an article on. I still need to do part 2 of that article. And there's something called Gola yoga that occurs when all the planets, they'll never be all the planets, but most of the planets are in 4 houses. K2, of course, isn't, but all the other planets are in 4 houses. And this produces this Nabasa yoga called Gola yoga. But there's some other yoga here that is not on one of the Nabasa yogas that is not that common. I don't really have that many examples of it, but this chart is. Anybody have any idea what I'm talking about?
The
third lord, sixth lord, eighth lord, and 12th lord in the 12th house.
What do we call this? Correct. It's a full Viparit Raja Yoga. So this is yoga is given in the Sanskrit classic Uttara Kamarita, and it's not that common. And it's defined by when all the trick house lords are in a trick house and there's no other house lords with it or aspecting it, which is what we have here, right? Saturn is, the sun is the sixth lord, Saturn is the eighth lord. I'm sorry, Venus is the eighth lord and Saturn is the 12th lord. This yoga, when it exists, one of those trick houses are going to be in its own house, right? And this is the case here. And of course, he moved into this infant, moved into this Venus major period. But now I also want to invite people to think about what sort of combination this becomes if you use this combination from Dasha Lagna, and even what kind of combination it becomes from the moon. And one sort of interpretation I've given to the family about that.
Well, from the moon, very wealthy.
Right. And then, but also from Dasha Lagna, what do you see?
5-9 Raja Yoga.
Right. So the child's not going to be poor. And he's born into quite affluent circumstances that are just going to become more affluent. Anyway, so it's a good combination for wealth, right? Okay. So this is what I had to share with you today, folks. And I appreciate everybody, jumping in here and making good comments and so on. So I think some of you may be aware that I'm going to be in India for the entire month of February. I am going to, you are going to get some written instruction material that will come out in February. I won't be able to we won't do any webinar associated with that until March, right? So just please be aware of that. So we will, unless there's any additional thoughts or comments that people want to make, we can conclude with our Sanskrit prayers we normally do.
Mark, just one question, not exactly related to today. What is the exact definition of the Raja Lakshana Yoga?
Okay, so it starts with the sun and Jupiter should be together. I think also in a mutual aspect that would qualify. As usual, for the best Raja Lakshana Yoga, there should be the strength of planets involved, and there shouldn't be any blemish of the influence of natural malefics. So since you asked the question, let me just sort of share screen again. I always like to teach through example. And what does Raja Lakshana mean? It means having the characteristics of a king, or noble characteristics, right? And a good Raja Lakshana Yoga you'll find will produce such individuals. And I'm going to pull up the chart of the very famous basketball player, LeBron James, who's remarkable. I think he's past the age of 40 and he's still just playing at an extremely high level. So he's had really, really longevity here. So you can see here he has a really good Raja Lakshana Yoga, right? Jupiter here is not only in its own sign, but it's Vargotama. It's with the sun. The sun itself has strength because it goes to its own sign in Navamsha. There's no blemish of natural malefics on it at all. Jupiter, of course, is also part of a good Gajikesari Yoga. And, he's been a noble individual. Actually, he's actually referred to as the king. And he's been someone who has used his great wealth to fund many charitable and worthy causes. So in that sense, he's been a noble individual. Does this help explain this?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good question. Anything else? All right, so we will conclude for today with our Sanskrit prayer. Om Masatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Vrityurma Amrikamdramaya Sarvesham Swasti Bhavatu Sarvesham Shanti Bhavatu, Sarvesham Punam Bhavatu, Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, Om Shanti, 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Take care, everyone. Be well. Till we all meet again. Namaste.
Thanks, Mark. Enjoy your